By early 1945, Imperial Japan was running on fumes. The war was tilting toward an inevitable defeat. Allied raids were pounding cities night after night, turning factories, rail yards, and shipworks into smoking craters. Raw materials were scarce, fuel was scarce. Skilled labor was thinning out as the nation bled itself dry. In the air, America owned the sky. Japanese interceptors could no longer mount a reliable defense. B-29 superfortresses crossed the home islands with growing confidence, burning neighborhoods, choking production, and breaking morale as much as machinery. Desperation filled the gaps where strategy used to live. Kamikaze attacks, grim, deliberate acts of sacrifice, were embraced as a last way to hurt the enemy. On land, the old banzai charge gave way to dig-in-and-die positions, holding ground to the last man. Civilians were drawn in. Men and women drilled with bamboo spears. School children marched and trained for the unthinkable. Teenagers were mobilized, and the usual guardrails of a civilized society were pushed aside in the name of survival. That is the stage for our story. Tragedy first, logic second, where any new innovation in the air would be less a triumph of design than a fight for breath. In that collapsing world, Japan's once proud air arm was showing its age. The Mitsubishi A6M0, a symbol of national pride in 1941, had started the war like a dancer, light, nimble, and untouchable. But by 1944 and 45, that grace had turned fragile. Its thin skin offered little protection. Its firepower lagged behind, and its engine struggled for breath above 20,000 feet. The old Zero simply couldn't reach the new kind of war. B-29 bombers cruised safely at 30,000 feet, too high for Japan's mainstay fighters to intercept. And when American escorts, P-51 Mustangs, F-6F Hellcats, and P-47 Thunderbolts, entered the picture, they dominated every altitude and every engagement. Yet the Zero kept rolling off the assembly lines. Japan had no choice. Its simple construction, light materials, and familiar tooling made it the only fighter the country could still build in numbers. The factories that remained clung to what they knew best. But even the most loyal engineers knew the truth. A new aircraft was desperately needed. One that could climb fast, hit hard, and hold together under pressure. That impossible task now fell to a few surviving firms: Kawasaki, Nakajima, and Mitsubishi, each searching for an answer in a nation running out of time. For Kawasaki, the fading glory of the Zero was a wake-up call. If Japan wanted a fighter that could compete with the Allies, it would have to abandon its reliance on big, round radial engines and follow Europe's lead. So the engineers at Kawasaki set out to go German. They obtained a license to build the Daimler-Benz DB601A, a liquid-cooled, inline engine producing roughly 1,100 horsepower, and began shaping a very un-Japanese airplane around it. The result was the Ki-61 Hien, sleek and narrow-waisted, with a pointed nose that looked more at home over Europe than the Pacific. Its airframe was strong but light, built from thin steel and alloy. The wings were tight and efficient, the lines clean. It carried two 20mm cannons and a pair of 12.7mm machine guns, heavy armament by Japanese standards. In testing, the Hien showed real promise. It stretched about 29 feet 4 inches long, with a 39-foot 5-inch wingspan and an empty weight around 5,800 pounds. At 20,000 feet, it could reach roughly 367 miles per hour, faster than the nimble Ki-43 Oscar or the stubbier Ki-44 Tojo. It gave up a touch of agility to the Oscar, but made up for it with speed and punch. On paper, it looked like a turning point. In the field, it became a headache. The German-designed engine hated Japan's humid climate. It coughed and misfired during takeoff rolls and lost power in the thick summer air. Japanese factories struggled to reproduce Daimler-Benz tolerances with scarce metals and crude machining. Mechanics in the field found the inline motor almost impossible to service. When one failed, it had to be pulled and shipped back to the mainland for repair. For all its promise, the Ki-61 became less a weapon than a warning. It proved Japan could design something modern, but not sustain it. The Hi-yen was a fine idea strangled by reality, a technical burden that foreshadowed both disaster and, strangely enough, an accidental breakthrough still to come. Fate made the next decision for Kawasaki. In early 1945, Allied bombs leveled the factory that produced Japan's version of the Daimler-Benz DB601 engine. When the smoke cleared, more than 270 finished Ki-61 airframes sat idle, sleek fuselages with nothing to power them. For a nation already starved of engines, it was a crisis inside a catastrophe. Then came an unlikely solution. Engineers decided to fit those stranded airframes with the Mitsubishi HA112-2, a 14-cylinder air-cooled radial that produced around 1,500 horsepower. It wasn't elegant, but it was available. Thousands of them sat in warehouses across Japan. Crews knew how to service it, parts were plentiful, and unlike the temperamental inline motor, it could run in almost any weather. The challenge was fitting a wide, round engine into a narrow nose built for a slim one. Kawasaki reshaped the forward fuselage, borrowing a page from Germany's Focke-Wulf FW190 by giving it a gentle, teardrop taper. Without radiators, coolant lines, or pumps, the airframe shed nearly 200 pounds, gaining balance and simplicity. The radial's bulk added drag, but careful streamlining kept it manageable. Flight tests showed what no one expected. Top speed dipped slightly, from about 367 down to 360 miles per hour at 20,000 feet, but handling improved dramatically. The new fighter was stable, forgiving, and smoother on the stick than anything Japan had built. Maintenance crews loved it. Pilots trusted it. What began as desperation turned into revelation. This improvised hybrid, born of necessity and rubble, would become Japan's last, and arguably best, wartime fighter. A technical accident, yes, but one that flew better than it had any right to. When the first converted Ki-100 took flight on February 1st, 1945, the war was already closing in on Japan's doorstep. By March, conversion work began in earnest, and within 4 months, 275 airframes that once sat idle as Ki-61s were reborn with radial power. They reached frontline squadrons just as the Allies' air onslaught reached its peak. The Ki-100's baptism of fire came against the best fighters America could field: P-51 Mustangs, F-6F Hellcats, P-47 Thunderbolts, and the high-flying B-29 Superfortresses. On paper, it looked outmatched. In practice, it surprised everyone. At low altitude, it could hold roughly 340 miles per hour, keeping pace with Mustangs and Thunderbolts down in the thick air where most dogfights began. What truly impressed pilots was how it felt. The Ki-100 was exceptionally light on the controls, smooth in turns, and almost impossible to stall. It rolled easily, turned fast, and gave pilots a level of comfort rare in Japanese fighters. Many compared it to an improved Ki-61. Same bones, better balance. Its few shortcomings were predictable: thin armor and lighter guns than its American counterparts. In a head-on exchange, it could be shredded by 6.50 caliber machine guns from a P-51 or P-47. Still, it fought well. On July 16, 1945, a group of Ki-100s tangled with Mustangs over Japan. Reports vary, but Japanese claims list 6 P-51s down for the loss of 5 of their own. Probably exaggerated, but enough to show they could trade blows. 9 days later, on July 25th, 18 Ki-100s clashed with 10 F-6F Hellcats. Both sides claimed 2 enemy planes destroyed, suggesting an even draw, remarkable considering the odds and the war's dire context. Against bombers, the Ki-100 was less ideal. Its radial engine lost efficiency above 30,000 feet, while the B-29 cruised comfortably near 32,000. There, the Japanese fighter's top speed dropped to about 330 miles per hour, leaving it unable to chase the superfortresses for long. But in the lower skies, where most intercepts and defensive patrols occurred, it performed admirably, steady, reliable, and capable of clawing back respect from an enemy that had owned the air for months. In the dying months of the war, Japan finally had a fighter that could hold its own. It wasn't the fastest or deadliest, but it was balanced, quick to respond, easy to fly, and forgiving enough for the young green pilots Japan was now forced to send aloft. The Ki-100 became a quiet triumph amid ruin, a machine that reminded even its enemies that skill and ingenuity hadn't vanished from Japan's skies. It was proof that, even as the empire crumbled, the engineers at Kawasaki could still build something that mattered. As production continued, a few refinements appeared on what was now Japan's best fighter. The Ki-100 formed the backbone of the fleet, 275 converted airframes that had once been Ki-61s. A slightly updated version, the Ki-100I Otsu, featured a cut-down rear fuselage and a clearer canopy, giving pilots far better visibility in combat. The final evolution, the Ki-100-2, carried a bulky supercharger weighing roughly 400 pounds. It boosted high-altitude performance to about 354 miles per hour below 26,000 feet and 367 miles per hour at 32,000 feet, allowing the aircraft to breathe a little easier where the B-29s roamed. But Japan's industry was already broken. Fuel, metals, and trained workers were vanishing. Plans to mass-produce the new model in September 1945 died alongside the war itself. In total, fewer than 400 Ki-100s of all types were ever completed. 2 were captured and shipped to the United States for testing. 1 survived the post-war scrap heap and now rests at the RAF Museum in Hendon, England, a rare survivor of a desperate age. In history's long view, the Ki-100 became the final song of Japan's piston era, a last graceful note before the jet age silenced the propeller's roar forever. When viewed beside its peers, the Ki-100 stands out not by numbers or speed, but by balance. The A6M0, Japan's wartime icon, had begun the conflict as a legend, fast, graceful, and seemingly invincible. But by 1945, it was hopelessly outdated. Its thin armor and weak guns no match for American firepower. The N1K1 Shiden was a brute by comparison, strong and heavily armed, but its tricky handling demanded only the most experienced pilots, and Japan had few of those left. The Ki-84 Hayate was the speed king at roughly 427 miles per hour, but it was temperamental, plagued by maintenance issues and unstable under stress. The Ki-100, by contrast, hit a rare sweet spot. It wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but it was honest, quick, agile, easy to fly, and remarkably dependable. In the collapsing world of 1945, practicality mattered more than perfection. For a young or exhausted pilot, that made the difference between fighting and simply surviving. In the end, the Ki-100 became Japan's most balanced fighter of the entire war. It embodied the nation's late maturity in aeronautical design, a quiet success born from failure. Amid the wreckage of empire, Japanese engineers had crafted something close to perfection, even if it arrived too late to change fate. If the 0 was 01, then the Ki-100 was 02. The next step in spirit, if not in time, the final evolution of courage and persistence. And with that, our story comes full circle, from desperation to discovery, from ruin to a fleeting moment of brilliance in Japan's darkening sky. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into one of World War II's most overlooked fighters, Help keep its story alive. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever seen the Ki-100 in person, or maybe the old Zero at an air museum? What did it make you feel? Give this video a like if you believe forgotten machines like this still deserve a voice. And don't forget to subscribe. We've got more stories coming from the golden age of piston power, when courage, metal, and a little luck could still change history.